Hey everybody, welcome back to the KrakCast News. I'm John, there's Josh over there, Dave is here, Dr. Mike is here. Lots and lots of stuff to talk about this week. We're going to start with something, I guess you could say this is kind of proof that no idea is too stupid when it comes to the government trying to take your money. Dr. Mike, tell us about the idea for an entry tax or an entry fee to visit our lovely city.
Basically, one of our lovely city council members, has proposed the idea of about €1 charge for any tourist entering the city. She's also suggested, Małgorzata Janus, I believe that's her. She's also suggested that this money can be spent to providing free public transportation for locals. She's kind of copying the idea that Venice introduced not too long ago for tourists, either coming by car, by plane, by cruise ship, whatever. Well, I'm probably not going to have cruise ship.
So in other words, Venice, an island, which kind of makes this a little more straightforward when it comes to getting people to pay like an entry fee, like a ticket. How do we do that here? How do you physically set up a system where people have to pay €1 to enter the city?
The funny thing is,
how stupid is this?
All of her political opponents are asking for details, and she's like, "I gave you the details." No, you didn't. It's like the proposition is basically like a one-page one paragraph, like €1 from everybody. Actually, the amount of money she mentioned is not
it's only
clear as well.
13 million tourists in Krakow a year. 13 million euro wouldn't go very far.
No. And actually, more than half of those tourists are Polish tourists, when presumably
tourists pay money, and half of since they're Polish, how are we going to figure out how to get around it? Or
I'm not a tourist. I just happen to be passing.
Can I just say, it seems like it's one of these stories where a classic incompetent politician throws out half-baked idea with absolutely no thought or research gone into it, because, of course...
God, and how unusual is that?
My mind naturally wanders to the many European cities that do have a tourist tax, like a hotel tax is quite common across Europe as well. I think Dublin are considering a €10 levy per person is quite controversial. And it is a handy way of tourist-heavy cities attracting some kind of loot there. I mean, could you make the argument, boys, that, tourists really do use a lot of the city's resources and hence should pay something back?
Yeah, aren't they already paying in the form of hotels and the VAT and the food and everything else? They're already they're leaving a lot of money here already.
You always get to do devil's advocate. I'm doing it this week, all right? Okay.
Well, she also mentioned the fact that she did mention the legislative backing for this, because back in the day, lots of cities could charge something called a podatek klimatyczny, so a climate or an environment tax. If you live like mountain cities or historical cities would charge this because they would say oh, it's so clean and nice here, you should pay extra, like hotel tax.
I can see a climate tax coming back very, very soon for a slightly different reason.
Actually, a lot of people took the cities that charged this to court, saying well, what about your air pollution? It sucks. So the legislation was changed, but now the legislation that's being introduces the concept of historical value as well. And apparently Krakow might enter this. It's we'll be charging a tourist tax based on the fact that we're a historical city.
And I don't think you can compare it to Venice either. And there's a lot of tourists in Krakow, but it's not quite the walking mausoleum of a city that Venice is.
Mm-hmm. And I just wonder, going to have turnsticles on the outskirts of town or something? You pay a ticket, you get buzzed in.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm curious about this because
you get a stamp on your hand. Yeah,
I can guarantee you, just outsourcing the contract to put a system like that in place will cost nearly 13 million euros.
Yeah, it will cost 15 million a year. Yeah.
I mean, just on a factual point here, I was actually in Venice not so very long ago, and nobody charged me to go in.
No.
There's so I'm guessing the system isn't as airtight.
But you drove, right?
Well, we drove to the main, the Greater Venice metropolitan area.
The tax on a back road.
Then, if you want to go over to the island, the bit, if you say Venice, people think of canals and everything, which is actually an island, a smaller part of the main metropolitan area, and you go across a bridge or a causeway by bus or by tram, or you can drive, and you don't because there's no parking. But at no stage did anybody, approach me and say...
The honor system, you're supposed to buy it because they might ask you for it.
You know what I think it is in the case of Venice, guys? I think it's the cruise ships pay the fee, on behalf of their passengers. No, there's no actual, €1 at a time the cruise line pays. This reminds me of something that I saw in the Ukraine. Maybe you've seen this in other places too. When you go to a museum or some kind of tourist attraction, and the price for non-citizens is 50 times higher than the price. Like in Ukraine, the Ukraine, it was 1 hryvnia for Ukrainians, 25 for everybody else, which I found outrageous. But isn't that de facto the same thing, making more money off tourists? Maybe we could do that here.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Yeah, I'm not sure really, to be honest with you.
No, I've seen that in other countries as well. It's annoying, and because you feel like you should be treated like just like any other customers. But there's also the argument to be made that a lot of these like public venues, museums, whatever, are partially run by taxpayers' money. So it's set up a lot for local residents who are already paying for those services indirectly through their taxes in some extent. But then you have tourists coming in who haven't paid for it through their taxes, so they get the full price. But then again, they're leaving a lot of money there anyway.
And I think there's a reasonable argument as well if there is a, as is the case in Ukraine, where there's a substantial disparity between your kind of general kind of like cost of living and that of the majority of your tourists. So
they think all the tourists are rich, so why not give us some more money? Yeah.
Well, yeah.
This idea is not going to happen. So it's getting a lot of media coverage, I think, because it is so stupid and so impractical and so undoable generally. And I forget whatever.
Where are they going to put the turnstiles?
Whatever.
Yeah,
we did the councillor a favour by discussing the notion of a sensible piece of legislation, which we still oppose. Pretty much, I was playing devil's advocate.
We're hoping for our consultancy fee very, very soon. But
let's move on to here's a subject that I don't think we've ever covered on the KrakCast before. Crosswalks or zebra crossings or what's the other? What else do we call it around here? I don't know. What do you call it? Pedestrian crossings, whatever. In the news this week, Dave, we know you have some very strong opinions on this, but first, Dr.
I have
Mike,
some very strong factual evidence on this.
Dr. Mike, set us up. Why is this in the news this week?
Well, basically, some stats have been coming out, and the what's called PR people from the police have been talking about changes that are being made with crosswalks here in Krakow. They decided to actually start repainting them, redesigning them, because, well, a lot of accidents were happening there where pedestrians would just cross, drivers wouldn't stop. On Armia Krajowa, they actually introduced these poles that they put on the lane markers in the middle of the road that, drivers will notice these sticks sticking out of nowhere and slow down just before the crosswalk. That's part of it. They've also repainted the lines there to make it look like the lanes are actually getting narrower, also to get drivers to slow down.
Really?
My question is, won't the drivers just like freak out what's going on the road and actually not look what's going on the
slam on the brakes and skid out of control?
Exactly.
Well, it's kind of bizarre, isn't it? Because I'm just going to pile in straight away, but like in the UK for like literally decades, since I got my driving license, which is not long after the internal combustion engine was patented,
1923. It was a good year.
Not too bad. There's been a system of zigzag lines leading up to a zebra crossing, which is what we politely call these things. Zigzag lines, you're not allowed to park on those zigzag lines. You're not allowed to overtake on those zigzag lines. They go for about 25 metres either side of the crossing. We've also since forever had flashing orange beacons called Belisha beacons, named after Hor Belisha, who was the Minister of Transport at the time, but we don't really need to know that.
Deep knowledge.
And lighting over the zebra crossing.
So what else can you do? Jesus Christ.
So that in Britain, what a zebra crossing.
Lights.
You're not allowed to overtake. You're not allowed to park.
Sacred ground you're on when you approach
it. It is. And in fact, I once did park in the prohibited area close to a zebra crossing, and a policewoman approached me and said, "You can't park here." And I said, "Well, it's an important job, and if I get a ticket..." And she said, No, this is not like a parking offence.
Serious.
And I said, I'll just get my keys. And I'll
So that means, Josh, there should be 0 accidents at crossings in the UK.
Well, that is pretty much the case, yeah.
Oh, never mind. I was expecting something else.
Apart from cyclists flying over them at 50.
Okay, so
no, I'll be honest. When I remember going to the UK after living in Poland, just being shocked, like I walked up to the crosswalk and every car around would just stop. And I'm just...
What's wrong with you people?
Like here in Krakow, it's like I remember walking up to the crosswalk and just basically the only chance I had of crossing is if I know there were no cars within like...
All right, guys, let's stand back and let Dave take over on the issue of crosswalk.
Yeah, we just...
Get behind something. Get behind a piece of furniture.
Before I fire up the rant cannon, I'm going to attempt some mitigating fairness, okay? I've been to Thailand with my dear wife.
What a weird introduction to this topic.
Stranded on one side of a road in Pattaya for over an hour trying to get to our hotel because of the terrifying gauntlet we were expected to run. Okay, so I'm not saying that Poland's the worst country in the world, but it's firmly
Thailand is
rank.
worse. Okay,
Josh, that was a beautiful description of how respectfully, it's the same pretty much in Ireland. One of the absolute fundamental rules of the road is pedestrian crossings and stopping before them, for God's sake, to let people cross. When I got to Poland, I don't know if you've heard this now, about 15 years ago for the first time, Polish people told me that if you want to cross at a pedestrian crossing, to have the right of way, there should be more than 3 people. There should be 4 people.
I've never heard that.
I know. I used to hear this off loads of people. Now, this is a long time ago. Has anyone ever heard that before?
Never.
I think your leg was being firmly tugged.
I just want to throw that out there to our listeners. Has anyone
to stand there,
ever
two or
heard
three
it?
people join you, and then as a group you can cross the street.
I just think
to throw ahead of you.
Just 2 more people needed, and we can.
this unbelievable nugget of advice is always stuck in the back of my head as I see a car approaching a pedestrian crossing at 70 kilometres an hour, and as I step out screeching on its brakes, and as I turn in anger to remonstrate with said motorist, they always look absolutely shocked, like I've done something wrong. So let me just break it down for you how it happens here in Poland. Every day I cross Rondo Jegorzecka, and no matter what colour it is, if there's a gap between the people, the car goes at full speed. Yeah, the whole thing is considered like, I'll go behind you, I'll go in
Dave,
front
we're talking about a crossing that's not regulated with a light. It's just
it has a light. It has a green light.
It has a light.
It has a green light, and it's just chaos, man. I mean,
with the light.
If that light goes green and there's nobody in the radius of the actual lane that car is, it won't even slow down. It will fly straight across it, and it won't even think about it. There is a culture in this country that you dodge pedestrians at crossings.
Like
you don't
traffic
stop
cones.
for them. Yeah, you just make sure.
Slalom course.
If you don't kill them, you have done your job. That seems to be the Polish
no harm,
culture.
no foul. Huh?
I live around the corner. I'm not done, Mike. Sorry, don't lean in.
Okay,
I live around the corner from a street called Dashinskiego, okay? And the cars bank off there very quickly. Some efforts have recently been made to add extra inhibitors to them. But constantly at that pedestrian crossing, where there's a children's playground just behind with a series of enclosed entrances that they could pop out at any time, cars go just so fast down there. It's ridiculous. Like, you know, Krakowians, when you see a pedestrian crossing, stop. If someone's on it, obviously.
Okay, take a breath. Dr. Mike, how do you find the general Polish attitude towards the pedestrians at crosswalks?
I was actually about to say that things have gotten a lot better than they used to be. And everything that Dave said is true right now.
They're still lagging behind.
I'll be honest. When I walk to a pedestrian crossing here, I am shocked when a car stops. But there was a time when they wouldn't stop. Yeah. So now they do stop 1 in 5 times, and I'm pleasantly surprised.
Grudgingly, while growling their motors and making
that revving thing. That's
I'm always nervous because then I'm worried about the car coming from the other direction.
I'm going to take the middle ground here. Yes, if you stand there,
Central Reservation.
if you stand and wait for somebody to stop to let you cross, you might be there for some time. But if you step out in the street, if you're a little bit aggressive, people will stop. Yeah, if you make them stop,
John,
they will.
My issue is the speed they approach when you step out. There's a late brake culture. There's a kind of, you know, but I want to see your brake lights a good 20 metres away. I want to see you preparing. Exactly. I need an indication from you that you're not about to kill me.
I think they're waiting on an indication from you that you're going to cross the street.
You ever seen anyone use their phone while they drive, John?
Constantly.
Yeah, exactly. How am I supposed to know? How's Mikey supposed to know when he steps out on a fucking crossing that person has seen him?
Oh, okay. Let's lower the temperature a little bit in here.
I'm so glad we got to talk about this.
So, to return to the original point, Dr. Mike, the city is supposed to make crossings kind of more visible, kind of give drivers more signals that they need to slow down.
There's talk about improving the lighting that will actually set up, just like in the UK, where the pedestrians are lit up and visible when they're crossing. And a lot of people don't realize, though, that there are a lot of laws here similar to the UK about if a pedestrian is on a pedestrian crossing, the car has to stop. And you cannot overtake another driver just before the crosswalk as well, which is a big problem here where somebody's crossing the road when there's 2 lanes of traffic. One car will stop, the guy's crossing the street and doesn't realize that there's another car after that who's speeding ahead.
Yeah, for sure. And you see this a lot on these, what do you call it, dash cam videos, which everybody has now apparently. You see them a lot, and it pops up in the news from time to time when some little kid, you know, barely escaped some horrible accident at the last second because somebody pulled him out of the street or something, because all it takes is just a moment of inattention, maybe looking at your phone like Dave says, and they fly through the crosswalk, and, you know, terrible things can happen.
I'm going to offer one other mitigator before we move on. I know mitigator is not a correct word, but who cares?
We know what you mean.
There are a lot of pedestrian crossings in Krakow.
Yep.
I think actually that's part of the problem. You know, if there were less of them and they were better designs, I think I could get along with that. I think the only thing I could concede to your average driver is there's perhaps a few too many of them. But badly respected.
Let me turn this into a meta discussion here. We mentioned the UK, we mentioned Thailand and Poland. We got 3 countries there. Do you think, this is a leading question, but do you think that there's some kind of loose correlation between a culture's general appreciation of order and rules and the way people behave at crossings. I think there is.
You lead, we follow, because I agree that there's definitely
UK at one extreme, Thailand at the other, Poland in the middle.
So we need a representative from Germany, really, because whenever you start talking about order, there is only one country.
True enough.
But it does mean that nobody jaywalks. I think it's a valid point. Nobody jaywalks because they're terrified to over here, because anyway, I'm not sure if I go along with that theory, John, because while the Polish people don't respect pedestrian crossings, in general, they respect the law quite a lot, I find,
I find Polish association with rules and order kind of relaxed sometimes. When it comes to specifically when it comes to driving and roads and whatnot, I think you can whatever you can get away with, go ahead and do it. That's the idea.
All right.
No, that's it.
That's it. Okay.
All right, let's cross the street on this topic.
So so Crosswalks was a new topic for us. Here's another new topic: tap water. Tap water. I had to say it that way. I don't know.
It comes from
water.
Faucet.
Water.
Why do you say faucet?
Why do I say faucet?
Do you say faucet?
Faucet water.
Faucet. No, we say tap water.
Yeah, no, but what do you turn it on with?
Faucet.
It's a fucking tap, you fancy French bastard.
Whatever. Tap is the actual thing that's in something that releases the water.
Okay, let's back away from that. Let's let it go. Dr. Mike, why is tap water in the news this week?
Well, basically, it's a citywide promotion or awareness program that they're trying to remind people that tap water here is okay to drink, and they're actually the city's trying to convince local businesses, restaurants, bars to serve tap water as their main drinking water. They even gave it that name of. God damn, what was it? Kranowianka.
Right.
Nice sounding kind of.
What's the motivation here? Is it environmental, buy fewer plastic bottles, that kind of thing?
It is about the whole plastic theme right now. It's to not buy plastic, bottled water in plastic bottles, but to drink tap water, which on paper is perfectly fine. I drink tap water all the time. I think it's perfectly fine. But I understand people that have some reservations about it, especially since they test the water all the time in different places, but they don't ever test the water in your apartment. And I'm always wondering, there could be, no one
ever tests plastic bottled water. But recently, some scientists did test it. And you know what they found, surprisingly enough, in plastic bottled water? Plastic. So I'll take the fucking tap water all the time. Obviously I utilised plastic in my drinking of water, but I refill bottles. I've always drank the tap water. Recently, after I got to Krakow, soon after, excuse me, there was a study published in Gazeta. Somebody was telling me about it in the pub. Obviously, I wasn't reading Gazeta. One of the girls behind the bar was saying that, that's strange, tap water has been declared safe. And as soon as I heard that, I stopped lugging 5 litres of water up my stairs every day, and I started drinking tap water like I've always done. It's a bit hard here. It's not as tasty as the tap water back in Ireland. There's a lot of hard beans, there's a lot of minerals in it. But Mikey, I'd like to ask you to medically check something here. I've been told by many Polish people that drinking tap water can give you kidney stones, and I've tried to convince them that I think that's not correct. I'd like your verdict on it as a medical doctor.
Yeah, that's not really a problem. Unless you really, drink only boiled down tap water where you've concentrated all the minerals and drink a lot of that and be genetically susceptible to kidney stones, then maybe your chance of getting kidney stones increases by 5%. But, there's a lot of ifs along the way. It's a complete bullshit. The amount of minerals in tap water, it's equivalent to good mineral water, maybe slightly more, but it's perfectly fine. It's mainly potassium, calcium, magnesium. No, sorry, not potassium, magnesium, and as well chalk and lime. It's stuff that your kidneys normally deal with. If you drink enough, it goes all through your system. It's not a health hazard whatsoever.
So everybody trusts the tap water here in town?
Yeah, I drink it.
I'll be honest, I don't drink it that often just because I grew up drinking tap water.
Mrs. McGinley,
for me, it's just a flavor. It's
Mrs. McGinley wouldn't touch it now. And a drop has never passed my son Charlie's lips and never will.
Taste-wise? What about taste-wise? Do you think any difference between bottled water and tap water?
I've seen difference between brands of bottled water that, I'll be honest, I drink mainly now. I drink tap water and I drink bottled sparkling water.
I drink shitloads of tap water. I fill up them and put them in the fridge, and I drink a lot of water.
Yeah, totally tap water here. Like the flavour of it. I think it's good stuff. I keep
I always have a glass when I get here. Of your
you do, and I keep a jug of filtered water ready for those people who kind of can't tolerate it straight from the tap, but if it's been through some kind of plastic filter.
A little interesting factoid I came across here reading about this: the price of water.
One thing I don't
people don't know this.
Sorry, one thing I don't think we've, and it is interesting, the price of water.
So interesting,
it's
you had
how
to cut me off.
controversial a topic this is amongst Krakowians, that some do believe that it's safe and some don't. Like, you know,
well, that's true everywhere. Everybody talks about this.
Well, I'm sorry.
I mean, it's supposed to be the cleanest water in the whole of Europe, isn't it?
Extraordinary how many Krakowians will not drink the tap water.
And it's deep water, groundwater. It's the kind of water that's usually bottled. Like, because I know in Warsaw they get a lot of the water that's filtered out through Wisła. But I'll be honest, I'm not afraid
It's been drunk twice in Krakow before they drink it in Warsaw.
I'm not worried about tap water here because of, like, say, E. coli or anything like that, because that stuff is regularly tested and your chances of getting sick are minimal. I'm always just worried that, yes, the water is tested everywhere for lead content, but maybe my building happens to be on a section of the old network, and I just, how do I check
I'm sure there's a place you could take tap water out of your tap in your sink in your kitchen and take it somewhere to be tested. Right?
Speaking of which, to interrupt you again, did you see the story that
an interruption of an interruption?
That there's massive down at start of Leia Pokoju waterwork issues in Krakow at the moment, adding to our road network chaos. We're about to be hit by one of the largest renovations of the 1930s network that Mike's referring to.
Woo-hoo.
So get ready to see more digging, people.
Can I make my point now about the price of water?
Yes,
Thank you. When you buy water, actually you pay twice. Once when it comes in, once when it goes out, right? Through your showers and whatnot. It comes into your apartment, it goes out of your apartment. When it comes in, you pay about 4 zlotys per cubic meter. When 1 cubic meter of water is about 4. When it goes out, you pay about 6. And so altogether, it's about 10 zlotys for a cubic meter of water. However many liters that is, no idea.
That's 1,000 liters. I mean, that's 6,000 liters there. No, wait, you said 10 cubic meters?
No, 1 cubic meter.
Okay, moving on.
This is 10 zlotys.
Yeah. This was nowhere near as interesting as you thought.
I thought it was interesting.
Cubic meter is
it started out interesting, but actually got
Come on,
dollar
you
and
go
dollar
to the
as
store,
it
you
went on.
pay 2 zlotys for 1.5 liters of water, or you can pay 10 zlotys for a cubic meter. It's huge.
I thought you were going to say, you drink all this water which you pay for, and then you go to the toilet. You have to pay to go to the toilet.
Okay, fine. Let's move on. Let's move on. Lots of political news this week, guys.
Politics.
PO desperate for attention in the news quite a bit this week. But let's start with the fact that they've lost one of their coalition partners, guys.
We predicted it, Mike, didn't you?
Yeah, that the coalition wouldn't survive until the actual elections in the fall.
We even called it without you that week.
I'm glad I'm having a good impression of you guys.
We don't need you.
PSL and PO basically haven't worked it out, which was funny because they were actually formed the coalition government back in the day when PO was heading the government.
What's PSL stand for again? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Polskie Stronnictwo Ludowe, so the front of the Polish people's front.
Populist people, yeah, right.
And so
the front of Judea.
They're out. And why are they out?
Nobody's sure exactly, but they're saying that they're worried that PO is going to left of center. While PSL, even though technically some people have called it kind of a left of center party, they're saying they're more conservative or traditionalist and would prefer to stay more right of center. PO is saying that PSL has wanted too much influence when it comes to like the situation. If they do win the election, who gets what seats, what ministries, etc., blah blah blah, and they don't want to negotiate those kind of things, like that they want to actually share ideas and concepts and ideologies and not talking about who gets what.
The PO is also in the news this week, not only because they lost a coalition partner, but Grzegorz Schetyna. That's what I said.
Like a wardrobe or something.
He's having like a schizophrenic breakdown or something because he's gone back and forth on the same issue several times this week. He's trying to get some motivation some momentum going.
He's trying to use
for the elections coming up in October.
He's trying to use this disastrous falling out with PSL to look like it's a move for the centre ground, which it isn't really.
Spin on it.
So he's promised as well, Mike, isn't he, that he's not going to move to the left. He doesn't want to hear any of this.
And that's why earlier in the week, Dave, on the subject of what do we call civil partnerships for gays.
Yeah, he's swerving all of that. I think there's
on Monday it was
a very clear message.
On Monday it was no way. On Wednesday it was definitely. We'll see what it's going to be like next week with no idea. But when it comes to social spending, he also made some really interesting remarks. He said that regarding the upcoming elections in probably October, he said, you know what? Maybe it's good if PO doesn't win those elections, because Poland is almost certainly heading for a Greece-style financial meltdown as a result of the spending policies of peace. And if that happens, people will blame PO just because we're in power, even though it's really peace's fault. So maybe it's good if we don't win. Is there a more effective way to keep our voters at home than saying it's better if we don't win?
I'll just say one thing before I talk about that. I hate it when opposition politicians, like, fair enough, debate the issues, go in there, oppose parliamentary the policies coming at you from the other side, by all means, but don't talk down your country. Don't talk about recessions and things like that. It's disgraceful to this. Like, I mean, what a thing to say out loud. We've had another example later in the show of politicians opening their mouth and saying astonishingly stupid things. But yeah, I thought that that quote should immediately...
it's a young democracy still. I mean, I think we have to, people are learning their craft.
So it was one thing to flip-flop on the issue of civil unions for homosexuals, and he also flip-flopped on social spending. As I just said, he said it was better if PO doesn't win because we are headed for a financial meltdown because of peace's social spending policies. Are spending too much money. This is unsustainable. And then later in the week,
we could have said something like.
Let me interrupt you. Later in the week, he tells Bloomberg reports anyway, that PO has unveiled an $8 billion euro spending package to kind of spend our way into prosperity. So one day it's yes, one day it's no, one day it's we're spending too much, one day it's we're not spending enough. Back and forth on everything. Oh, and on top of that, the cherry on top of this shit sundae is we are finally going to shut down coal in this country. Good luck, Mr. Shetnia.
Yeah, I mean, empty promises from an empty suit. What can I say? He's not a great leader at all. And, what... Sorry.
He's at a loss for words. First time ever. Write this down.
I totally lost my thread there, Mikey.
Basically, this is an example of why I gave up on PO years ago. They were a center-right, business-oriented party for a long time, and that got me interested. That was who I wanted to support. But every time they won, their policies were always based on whatever happened to be polling, to the point of where it was just a joke that they would change their policies, they changed their ideas. They would present it as like, oh, we're just being open to new ideas and where we can progress and we can evolve. And like, no, you guys don't actually have any ideology, don't have any actual things that you believe in. You just do whatever you think will right now look and be most politically expedient for you guys.
I remember what I was going to say now, sorry. It's a sign of a weak opposition leader when they reach for the hyperbole like that. He could have easily argued that if they keep spending this way, the inflation projections, the food price rises, he should stick to specifics. He should stick to genuinely oppositional arguments.
Scaring people where they get scared, like price of food.
And say this out loud, but these such arguments made in such a way will build credibility with voters and might actually convince them that he has an alternative vision for the country rather than sitting around going, look, there's going to be a fire and I don't want that to do with it, so I'm just going to stand over here being an idiot.
Thing is, that's exactly what I said. They have no vision. They have no ideas for the country. We've
been saying it since the first episode, man. They're just going nowhere under this guy. They need to get rid of Shetnia. Shetenia? How am I saying it?
Shetenia. They make it sound like he's from Shetenia.
Shetenia.
Not that he's a cloakroom.
What?
We slagged him off, but we got his name right eventually.
Well, we'll be talking about PO quite a bit, I'm sure, between now and the elections in October. Let's move on to...
It's not looking good for them, though, is it?
No, this could be catastrophic. It's just a matter of how badly they're going to lose.
I think peace will cover maybe 41, 42, something like that.
No majority this time, no? Yeah, we'll see.
I think it'll probably be, yeah.
Let's go back to the subject, or the category, rather, of things we've never talked about before on the KrakCast. Let's add another one, Moldova. Moldova, everybody's favorite subject.
We all mulled over that one for a long time.
This week, the Polish foreign minister was in Moldova expressing support for Moldova's EU aspirations. We'll get to that in just a second. But let's use this as an opportunity to talk about something called the Eastern Alliance.
It's called the Eastern Partnership.
That's what I said, the Eastern Partnership.
Yeah, it's one of these strange, clubs that form between nations. There's so many of them. We won't start listing them, but this one's a bit unknown, and it's a strange group in the countries. It includes Moldova, Belarus, apparently Alexander Lukashenko is looking to embrace democracy all of a sudden, Ukraine. So these are, non-NATO states in the old Soviet satellite space, and the idea is to bring them closer to European values, European standards of government. And let's be clear about it, there's pretty transparent idea to eventually have these countries ascend to the European Union itself. Nothing wrong with it, I suppose, in principle. It's a kind of meaningless organisation, really. I mean, it has no power. Let's be clear about this. This is the type of thing conspiracy theorists find sinister undertones in. But, I mean, it was only formed in 2008. What else would you like me to say about it, John?
Well, let's return to Moldova. Does Moldova have a snowball's chance in hell of joining the European Union?
There's no real will. See, France and Germany hate the Eastern Partnership. They see it as another kind of V4, Visegrad kind of internal power game by the Eastern states, kind of band up together and.
Because it's okay when France and Germany band together to have influence and power, but
that's
you
okay.
guys, no,
it's different. No. Mm-hmm. I see this as a cheap way for Poland to make friends in Moldova, knowing very well that whatever they express support for is never going to happen. I mean, oh my God. And just to return to a point that I've made several times, Dave, I know you love to hear it. If everybody's in the club, what does it mean to be in the club? And the EU is too full already. And to add Ukraine, to add Belarus, to add Moldova, this is just a pipe dream.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely never going to happen.
Okay, but look, you're into arguments about, Lisbon Treaty, ever closer integration and stuff. That's a whole separate basket, the direction of the EU. But there has always been an idea that one of the ways you spread democratic values and respect for markets, respect for institutions,
you dangle the carrot like they did with Turkey,
law,
and look how
in the hope that the countries like Turkey, Moldova, Belarus, that is hilarious.
Sorry, guys, you have to draw the line somewhere.
Come on, dude.
It's even worse than Russia.
It's not quite on the scale of giving Iran the human rights thing in the UN, but like it's fucking getting up there. I mean, Lukashenko's the last dictator in Europe. Like, come on. Ireland are in this. There's 28 member states in the Eastern Partnership, including Austria, Belgium.
Ireland's in the Eastern Partnership?
Apparently.
What does East mean exactly?
If you're east of New York City, I guess.
Bad news for you, my boy. You've intentions to leave it, but that hasn't been rubber stamped yet. It's tied into a little thing we rarely talk about on this show. Yeah, Luxembourg are in there, Italy. Like I say, it's just something we wanted to mention because you never hear anything about the Eastern Partnership because it has absolutely no real importance in your lives.
Well, maybe we'll return to the subject of Moldova in another year or 3 or 5 or something.
It's nominally about, spreading trade and cooperation.
Let's bring things back here to our neighborhood. This is something that's in the news for the last couple of weeks since the end of the Jewish festival. Very interesting, very strange goings on. Again, you may have seen something about it in the news already. The Isaaca Synagogue was closed off and literally closed off with thugs, hired thugs guarding the gates, not letting anybody in. And
private security personnel.
Private security personnel
wearing balaclavas and armed.
And they were not allowing visitors to the Jewish festival, including rabbis, including the rabbi of Poland, Avi Baumel, who's a friend of the show, by the way. He's been here in our studio. They were not allowing them to come inside to worship. And it's part of a really nasty and complicated conflict going on within the local Jewish community here.
Yeah, he was on the show, the rabbi, Avi Baumel. I've been kind of keeping up with his blog on the Times of Israel. He writes a great blog. And I was, just outraged. I consider him the KrakCast rabbi above all, not above all, obviously.
But we're kosher.
We don't have any other rabbis.
Locked out of his place of worship. It's absolute disgrace. It is. Now, look, there's complications. It's an ongoing legal battle. But it seems like an outrageous move to me to lock out not just Avi Baumel, all of the worshippers, the rabbi, including a 90-year-old Auschwitz survivor. Nice. Yeah, I was really angry when I saw the story, and I'd just like to give my support to the rabbi.
Dr. Mike, any information about kind of maybe the basic outline of where the conflict starts here?
We have to remember that the synagogues here, the property is held by the Gmina Żydowska in this area. Gmina Żydowska is kind of like the municipality, the Jewish municipality. Just like in churches, you have cathedrals that are owned by the either by monasteries or by the bishop or the
like an administrative body.
It's an administrative body that actually administrates and owns the property here. Like after World War II, for obvious reasons, there weren't too many Jews left over. So it took a while, but then it was figured out like who, what family, what people will be the ones in charge of it. And now it turns out there's this one family that's become very influential, and they're being called out by other Jewish groups for administrating this to their own personal private profit ends.
for looking to increase the rent, according to the article, by up to 1,000%. You know, gouging their own community here. You know, so it's obviously a painful subject for Rabbi Avi Baumel to have to write about. Obviously, something that he would, much prefer to have never happened, and I can't see any reasonable grounds for locking a man out of his place of worship. It was disgraceful.
There's also and I'll just add this briefly because I only discovered this a couple of days ago, but there seems to be a side issue as well, which is on the other side of Platz Novi, there's a place which has opened recently as a kind of restaurant bar called Hevre, which used to be a synagogue, and there is some kind of shall we say, controversy about that and whether it's kind of entirely right that what is kind of sacred ground is being used as a place of entertainment. And I suspect that the same family is involved in this. And yes, well, there's obviously a lot more to this story.
Is Tadeusz Jakobowicz.
A lot of money at stake here, too. Serious money.
Story here. There's only one side that's been actually publicized, so we keep that in mind. But when you're talking about this bar restaurant, you have to remember that property is property. After a certain point, its use as a place of worship might have ended. You have churches all over the world that have changed hands and become private property.
All right. Well, the restaurant we keep is a separate issue, Mikey. But locking people out of their synagogue with armed thugs is a disgraceful new law for
especially during the Jewish festival.
Exactly.
With people from all over the world who came here for different reasons connected with the festival, and to keep them out, they couldn't do this in the middle of any other month. They had to pick now to
whatever
do this.
the dispute. It's a disgrace.
Well, we'll track the story and see where it goes. Here's a story that makes you wonder how certain people get elected to political office. This is just weird. The Polish school system has a bit of a bottleneck at the moment for reasons that Dr. Mike will explain in just a second. But it comes down to that high schools in Poland are having to accommodate more people than they otherwise would because of some reforms. Again, Dr. Michael will explain in just a second. And the result of this is that it's been badly handled, surprise. And as a result of that, thousands of teenagers, kids around the country are left without a school to go to in September, just a couple of months from now.
Sounds like a real potential political football, this one, Mikey.
No, it sounds like something that should be handled with, grace, dignity, and sophistication, competency, but no. A senator from the Law and Justice Party says that among the options these kids should consider is leaving the country and going someplace else.
I could not believe this when I saw this.
Pretty bad commute there.
Yeah, and we're going to get Mikey to explain the technical cluster F that caused all this.
Dr. Mike, how did this happen?
Before we say that, can I just say, politics has always been a blood sport, and sometimes you say something so stupid that you must walk straight to the side of the ship
and just jump
straight off the plank and on the captain's order jump. This is a disgraceful thing to let slip from anybody's mouth. A fucking idiot. So good boy, Andrzej, isn't it? Andrzej, his name?
I forgot, but
President.
Yeah,
Duda?
maybe.
No,
the senator. So, Dr. Mike, how did this happen? What's the situation in the schools, and why is it a problem now?
It's a little complicated, but the opposition presents it as if the first year of high school here will be double the amount of students starting. It's not exactly like that. You have to remember that in Poland, you've had a K-12 system just like in most countries, but it was broken up in different ways. For years and years and years, it was up to 8th grade, then a 4-year high school.
So 2 schools.
Yes, 2 schools, more or less. And then several years, when PO was in power, they introduced gymnasiums, kind of like middle schools. So instead of going from 8th grade to high school, you would go to these gymnasiums, which lasted till 9th grade, and then you would have
So it was a primary school from 1 to 6, gymnasium from 7 to 9, high school from 10 to 12.
Exactly. So, and you would have a 3-year high school.
Right.
When peace came back into power, they decided to, we're going to go back to the old system. And
they liquidated the gymnasiums.
But the thing is, you also have to realize that this isn't like in the States where if you're in 7th grade, it doesn't matter if you're in a primary school or in a middle school because the state has a different system in another country. 7th grade is 7th grade, 8th grade is 8th grade. The program is more or less the same. Here, what happened is gymnasiums would have like a different educational program, which would complete a certain amount of information, and then you go to your 3-year high school. But when they introduced the podstawówki, they changed the program that you have to 8th grade. So now what's going on in high schools, they have to have 2 parallel programs. So they have a 3-year high school and a four-year high school
Did
going up.
Nobody think about this a few years ago.
It's just the logistics that made it very difficult. So it's kind of like it's a little messed up. I mean, it could have been done properly, and it's not that the school all of a sudden has more students coming in. It's better to think that they have the same amount of ninth graders coming in, but they have a bunch more 10th graders coming in because it's 3-year or 4-year.
And there
program.
just simply isn't physical space for all of them.
It's not physical
at the
space.
moment.
It's because the 10th graders in the program with the 3-year high school are different than 10th graders in the 4-year program of high school. So they have to be separated, being taught different things.
Unbelievable.
So you have to split them apart. And it's going to take 3 years until the old gymnasium students go through until it's fixed. So basically you have high schools that have to have 2 parallel educational programs going on at the same time, which means that they just didn't have enough space depending on who's coming in.
And watch when PO comes back to power in 5 or 7 years, they're going to bring the gymnasiums back, and we'll go back to that system again. Dave?
I kind of stopped listening there a few minutes ago. That got complicated quick.
I'll be honest, there's a lot of moms in my work, and I just didn't understand what they were complaining about. But for me, because it wasn't that all of a sudden there was one generation of kids that there was twice as many. I couldn't understand the problem until I understood that the educational system here isn't a year by year where every year has a specific amount of information that you go through, but it was actually in blocks. So you had your grammar school block, your middle school gymnasium block, and your high school block information.
Nod your head like you understand.
So when they switch programs, all of a sudden, kids in 7th grade were in this program were learning this, while kids in the 7th grade of the other program were learning something else. It was incompatible.
Well, let's bring things to a close today with news of a job opening, a very unique job, very, very unique job opening, actually. The Krakow trumpet player, or the Haynau player, they are recruiting. There's an open position up there in the top of St. Mary's Church. Josh, you're a musician. Have you thought about maybe looking into it?
I don't know. What's the tune? I've heard it's quite well known.
They ripped it off from us, actually.
Yeah.
You think you can do it?
Yeah, of course, with the right equipment.
He's already restyled it into 5 different editions for this show.
Yeah. But I understand it's like a 24-hour shift, which sounds a little bit arduous.
That's already toilet facilities at the top of...
I haven't seen their toilet. Have you not been up to the top? Mike, have you been to the top?
I've been up to the top, yeah.
They have a nice little room up there. There's a television, sofa, fridge.
Do they have a lift?
Comfortable. No,
alarm clock set to go off at 5 minutes before each hour.
It's all stairs.
A freaking gold ghetto blaster with the recording and press play.
No.
I've always thought they should, renovate the inside of it and turn it into a bar. It'd be an awesome place for a bar, wouldn't it?
There's the Irish guy.
I do remember, back when I first came to Poland, came to Krakow, when I was living, right in the centre of the old town, actually, just off the Moe Rynek, and I was kind of curious about whether it's true that the Haynau is played every hour on the hour. And I did actually notice on those odd occasions when I'd have maybe a beer or two too many and I'm staggering home at about 4 a.m. that, yes, indeed, it is played all the way around the clock. And sometimes if he looks out the window and I guess he sees there's not that many people and the only people he can see are walking a little unsteadily, he puts a little swing into the throw. I've heard a few kind of slightly jazzed up Haynaus over the years. Yeah.
Or did you imagine it? And you'll never know. And that's maybe why they do it. I like that.
Right. Well, I immediately took those ideas and transformed them into, potential future KrakCast theme tunes.
Well, the announcement for the job.
Sorry, I used to live facing out on Gertrude, right out onto the road, and I could hear it every fucking time. Beautiful tradition. Love it.
No word on how much the job pays. Remember that technically the guys who work up there, and they're all guys, by the way, the guys who work up there are employed by the fire department. So technically they're employees of the fire department.
And as I've already raised, it's possible the job may involve shitting in a bucket.
I don't think that's part of the deal.
You're allowed to go downstairs for that 55 minutes where you're not playing.
You think they
do have a reasonable window to get the job?
You think they get paid pretty well because it's so prestigious, or they get paid kind of nothing because they work for 5 minutes an hour?
They could probably milk it for some sponsorship deals, with a trumpet company or something, kind of.
Probably get paid more than a woman would for an equivalent job.
Probably living high on the hog and mansions, driving Rolls Royces with their. What
do you think? 55 minutes watching TV and 5 minutes of work. Sound good?
Yeah, and they probably can afford all the crack and hookers they want up there while they're waiting.
Why did you have to go to crack and hookers?
Yeah, Mike, you're obsessed. Crack and hookers.
We were just about to wrap things up, and you had to throw crack and hookers in there.
Oh wait, this
maybe they do though. I don't know.
Shout out now to one of our listeners.
Don't even address any possible segue there, John. Just do
Dave, take that beer away from him. And
he was supposed to. No, you gave him a job earlier to remind you. That's all.
Never mind. Okay. Anyway, That's the news this week. We always finish on such a weird note. That's the news this week. What are you telling me? Dave is mouthing something to me. I have no idea what he's saying.
You were supposed to give a shout out to the
Yeah, we're going to do it at the top of a show, a different show, not this show.
Oh.
Why don't we give the shout out at the very end? No, we'll do it at a different show. Yeah, so listen to one of our other shows later this week if you really want to know who we're going to direct a shout out to. God,
fucking hell, you really...
we just fall apart at the end every time. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys.
Why are you keeping
See you next week on the KrakCast News.
It's a great way to get the listeners to hit up another show.
Don't hit stop.
There's like 2% of the people who started listening are still listening.
I think everyone still wants to know about this shout out.
Man,
no, you built it up now. Couldn't possibly get... Tune in to our next episode for a super special shout out to one of our very best supporters.
Stubborn and bald.